Good evening and Om Shanti. Om Shanti is a greeting of peace, and I think most of those of you who are here are familiar with this, but I'm curious to know who's here for the first time in this program. Can you just indicate? For the first time in this house? Special welcome to those of you who are here for the first time especially. Let's begin with just a moment of silence to get into that space of quiet and calm mind, and then we can explore the subject further. Thank you. The month of January is a very special month that we dedicate to the founder of the university. And here just behind me, you see his photograph. His name was Brahma Baba. And so this is how we come to be known as the Brahma Kumaris, the children of Brahma, sons and daughters of Brahma. And as I sat there just for a moment before we started, and I looked at Brahma Baba's face, I was thinking that really this is the perfect example of a person who had many, many responsibilities. And on a subtle level, those of you who believe in angels, and I do, will understand that even within the angelic realms, there's a huge amount of activity and service that needs to happen. And so all of that continues. And yet, still, here was a person who had a totally quiet and calm mind. And I say that not just from theory, but from practical experience. I had the very, very good fortune of meeting Brahma Baba several times through my childhood years and my adolescent years, and I'd see Brahma Baba cope with so many different things, whether it was events and situations and people and letters from across the world and personalities, the sorts of things that each one of us has to cope with in our own lives today. And today, of course, you can send off an email and it'll give you an answer instantly. You can get onto a website and get all the information you want to have. And in those days, that wasn't the case. I'm talking about the 60s. And at that time, you needed a very quiet and calm mind to be able to pick up the information that wasn't actually being conveyed in words or letters, but you needed to be able to tune in and to understand from a very deep level of the heart what it is that was happening and how to be able to respond to it. And so I actually had the good fortune of witnessing Brahma Baba cope with these sorts of things. And so it's possible to have a calm and peaceful mind and yet carry out a task of great responsibility, and being able to fulfill all those responsibilities with a great deal of love, not just out of a sense of obligation and duty, but really genuinely out of sincere love in your heart. But I have another question. Would it be easier if we didn't have responsibilities and duties and relationships to cope with, and we could all just sit on a mountaintop, just your own personal little mountaintop somewhere, or a little forest glade where you could sit by the river and just contemplate the water or your navel, whichever it is you wanted? Would it be easier to do that and have a quiet and calm mind? What do you think? What is easier? Who thinks contemplating the navel by the river would be easier? A few. And who thinks it's easier to cultivate a quiet and calm mind in the midst of activity and responsibility? A few more. And so what does everybody else think? Maybe minds have become so quiet, they've stopped thinking. Which is also fine. But I can see that you're weighing up the balance. Now what is it that's easier? This way or that way? And according to human life, it isn't actually possible for most of us to leave the world and go and sit either on a mountaintop or in the forest. In fact, when I was 19, and although I'd known Brahma Baba through many years earlier, it was at that time that I decided that this is the life I wanted. And I thought that that would be the best thing for me to do. To sit on the mountaintop at Abu. Many of you have been to Abu, and you know it's very beautiful there. And I thought, that's the place where I can learn to meditate and actually develop a calm and quiet that can stay with me forever. And when I suggested this to Brahma Baba, what do you think he did? He laughed. And he said, your mind will go crazy. You won't be able to sit in silence and experience stillness and calmness, because all the things that you're still attached to out there in the world, all the duties and responsibilities, all the karmic accounts that you have, all of those will pull you so strongly that you won't be able to experience a calm and peaceful mind. And so that was such a clear answer to me right at the very start of my own spiritual life and development, that it's made sure that I've kept on the right track. Another thing he said was that, how can you know that you do have a clear and peaceful mind unless you're in the midst of activity? If you've divorced yourself from activity and put yourself in a corner somewhere, you'll never know whether your mind truly is peaceful and calm. But it's when you're in the midst of activity that then you're going to be able to see whether that is a reality or not. And that is a fact, isn't it? Imagine having a new car and letting it sit in your garage. How would you know whether it's a good car or it just looks good? It's only when you actually take it out onto the road, into the traffic, that then you're going to know whether it is a good car or it isn't as good a car as you thought. And then you'll have to get things sorted out. So it's only when we're in the midst of the things that we need to be doing that then we know what's actually going on within the self. And tonight I'd like it to be more experiential rather than just a lecture. And so I requested that rather than just talk to you or talk at you, from time to time we'd have a few moments of experiments. And the first experiment that I experienced with Brahma Baba was that of allowing the mind to become very quiet through the understanding of one subject. There's many subjects that lead to that state where you lead your mind to a state of calm and quiet. But the very first subject is a subject of knowing the self, knowing the soul. And even as I say that it's the first subject, which it is, it's a subject that takes sometimes decades of discovery, because you still discover things about yourself that you hadn't anticipated. You thought you dealt with things, and then things come up and you discover that They are still lying there under the surface and need to be resolved. So knowing the self is a whole journey anyway. But just that first subject of knowing that I'm a soul and not a body. Very important subject, maybe the most fundamental on the path of spirituality. And it was Brahma Baba talking about this and in a way guiding me into that experience of stillness and silence that made me firstly realize what a quiet mind can be. So I'd like us to take just a couple of minutes now and experiment with that first subject. Some of you are very advanced meditators, which is wonderful. Some of you are here for the first time, as you indicated, which is also great. But this first subject is really something that we need to be continually looking at and practicing, not even on a day-to-day basis, but those of you who are familiar with this house know that every hour we play music through the house, and the purpose of that is to just be a gentle reminder to let the mind become quiet and calm again. And so what I'm going to do is to speak out my own thoughts as I bring my own mind back to that state of soul consciousness, and through that to an awareness of peace and calm. And I'll invite you to join these ideas. You don't have to repeat them after me. You don't have to chant them out aloud. Just gently let your own mind follow these ideas internally. So let the body sit comfortably. If you're holding things inside or outside, put them down so that you can be free. And just follow the ideas that I suggest. You can keep your eyes open if you wish and experiment with that, because that's also very important training to be able to be in the world and yet be able to see things from a different perspective, a spiritual perspective. And my suggestion would be that you look at that point of light that's in front of you and use that as a focus for your eyes. The form of the soul is a point of light. The form of God is a point of light. And so just gently letting your eyes stay open and looking at that being of light, that point of light, may help you. If you find it's not so comfortable, that's okay. You can gently let your eyes close, but make sure you don't go off into the land of nod, because that's also very easy to do at the end of a long working day. So stay alert. Keep the eyes open if you wish, and just follow these ideas. Letting the body relax. I let my body become calm. And in this state of calmness, I have the freedom to take a journey inside. And as I turn within, I come to the awareness of the spark of life, the living being, the spark of light, the being who I am. In the center of my forehead shines this radiant star. Focusing on this being that I am, a being of light, the speed of my thoughts slows down. and my mind becomes quieter, calmer. I connect with myself. I have focused outside for so long. And now, for a little while, I focus inside. I am light. I am peace. Peace is my natural state of being. This is who I truly am. I come back into the awareness of this room and the things happening here. But I keep this awareness of peace and who I am with myself. How long does it take a mind to become peaceless? You see something, you hear something, you remember something, and instantly there's a storm that can begin. And how long does it take for a mind to become peaceful? One thought. It can take an instant to let the mind become peaceless, but equally, it can take one thought to let the mind become peaceful. And if this is what I choose to do, it can happen. Just come back to the awareness of the eternal being that I am, and in that awareness, the thought of peace is generated. And it isn't just a thought, it's also a feeling. It's more than a feeling. It's actually a state of being, because this is the original, natural quality of the soul, that of peace. Sounds strange when we look at what's going on in the world today, and every newspaper headline, every radio announcement, every television program is about the opposite. And yet, the natural state of the soul is that of peace. And if there's a question why there's been such a dramatic shift, there's one answer, a very simple answer. Maybe some would say it's too simplistic, but I've come to believe and to experience the truth of it. At the moment that I remember I'm a soul, peace is there within me, and I can touch it and express it and emerge it. And at the moment that I forget that this is who I am, and I come into the identity of the body, which is actually not my true identity, it really isn't. I, the soul, am not female. I, the soul, am not Indian. I, the soul, am not middle-aged or old or whatever classification. All of these things that we associate are all associated with the body. And so all false identities. And so when the mind is associating itself so deeply and continually with whatever it is that is false, how is it possible to have peace? When I come back to the reality of who I am, in that state, yes, peace becomes possible. So one thought can lead to peace, but equally, one thought can take away that peace. A few other things that I want to connect with this whole subject of peace within our mind, or a quiet mind. Think about when you've been able to have a mind that's very calm and relaxed. And you'll probably find that it's times when there's a sense of well-being, there's a sense of good relationships with everyone, there's a sense of a conscience being clear, things moving in the direction that they should be moving, a time when your perception is clear, a time when your attitude feels very positive, a time when your intellect is working well, clearly. All of these things are very deeply connected with the whole subject of peace of mind. And those are some of the things that I'd like us to explore tonight also. I mentioned several things, but within that, one thing particularly I'd like to take up is the question of conscience. Because so often what's happening in the world today is that our conscience tells us something, and yet the reality of our life becomes something else. And when there isn't that alignment, what's going to happen? Is it possible then to have a mind that's calm and peaceful? Well, your own experience will tell you what the story is. And yet, I listen to that soft, gentle voice of conscience that's speaking inside, and I have the courage to follow that through in my life. Then that alignment allows a mind to stay very calm and peaceful. And so I need something more than just being able to go into the self and say, I'm a peaceful soul, to be able to experience that state of peace. Because conscience isn't just something that's abstract and working inside, but conscience is very much related to my work, my activity, my relationships, the things that I'm involved with, which is why Brahma Baba said at that time, with great wisdom, that you're not going to be able to have a state of peace just cutting yourself off from the world, but being in the world and doing things the way they should be done, yes, then there's a possibility of peace. And so what I need to do is to be able to see what's going on within my conscience, and to see if I can have a conscience that's clean, that's been scrubbed of all the other layers that have accumulated on top of that. And in fact, it was again one of the very powerful things that drew me to Raj Yoga in the early days. Because the question in my own mind had been, well, what is it that influences conscience? Because what I'd been seeing is that the way you're told this is right and this is wrong in one part of the world as to a different part of the world, there's a big difference in that. But not just in terms of geography, but in terms of culture. One culture will say this is right, another culture will say this is wrong. So what is it? And not even in terms of just culture, but generations. One generation will say, well, so what's wrong with this? And another generation will say, but this really isn't as it should be. And so, is there something which is a baseline that you can work with, which can actually guide you in terms of conscience? Or is it something that's shifting every moment, day by day? And so there isn't anything which is an anchor that we can build our life on. And again, Brahma Baba said something very profound. Baba said, human conscience is that which is part of the soul. And human conscience is not just eternal, but human conscience is actually universal. When you think about the soul and you think about a point of light, well, is there a difference between this point of light and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one? The features are different, the colors are different, the costumes are different, the hairstyle is different, many things are different. But if I were to look at each one just simply as a soul, I would see the beauty of each soul, I would see the dignity of every soul, I would see the goodness of every soul, because these are the original qualities of every soul, not just some, not just sages and saints, but every human soul has goodness and truth and purity and peace and love within itself. And so human conscience is absolutely there in each and every human being. And human conscience actually works equally the same in all. Which is why sometimes, like with the tsunami story, there was this huge upspring of compassion that arose in everybody's hearts, whether you were in one place in the world or another place in the world, but the outpouring of support and generosity and help that came out was enormous, just instant. An indication that when human hearts are touched, when human conscience is touched, then it doesn't matter about geography and culture and religion and gender and race. The support of the human family comes forth instantly. One little example, but proof to me of how the natural state of every human consciousness, of every human conscience, is that of goodness. Well, what happened along the line? Something happened, something went wrong. But imagine if this carpet wasn't cleaned every day, or even once a week. What would happen? You wouldn't be very happy sitting in this room, I can tell you that much. There'd be an accumulation of a little bit of dust, a little bit more dust, a little bit more, a little bit more, and within maybe a few days, you'd say, that room's not a very nice room. I'd rather be somewhere else. And so even in terms of something very gross and external and physical as a carpet, the layer of dust that it accumulates, even if there's nothing bad that's happening within the room, it's just normal activity, but there's an accumulation of dust. It's just natural entropy. That's how things work. Well, the same thing has happened to human conscience. Not only has there been an influence of negativity coming to us from outside, that has definitely happened. Every time you read a horror story in the newspapers, every time somebody relates a bit of gossip to you, or there's a little bit of dust that you accumulate. But not just that, there's another factor at work also. The accumulation of negativity that we've built up within our own hearts and our own consciousness. And it's probably not true for most of the people sitting here, but it is probably true for most of the people sitting out there somewhere. And that is that if you track back even the space of 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, probably you'd see that there's been an erosion of values gradually along that period of time. Look back 50 years and you'd see it even more starkly. But even 5 years and 10 years. And so the way my own conscience behaved and guided me some years earlier, and the way it's guiding me or not guiding me today is quite different. And that's the general trend. Things that we would have said, this really isn't right, some years ago. Today people will say, well, so what? That's part of human life. That's the story of life. And so there's definitely been an erosion of values that's been bringing us down further and further. And it's not something that's from outside. That's the interesting thing. Yes, you see the negativity outside, but the erosion of values that's happened has happened something on a personal, individual level. And my own personal values, where have they gone? Have they ascended or have they descended? Am I stronger in my commitment to my values, or am I a little bit more careless or even maybe totally unaware of those values that I originally began my life or my career or my work with? And as I say, probably it's been the downward trend that's happened. And so that state of conscience that was guiding me isn't as strong or as powerful as it used to be. And another reason for that is also because if you ignore the voice of a friend once, they'll forgive you. If you ignore the voice of your friend the second time, they'll think, well, is it worth giving advice? You ignore the voice of your friend the third time, forget it. Fourth time, they're really not going to bother to give you their time and energy and tell you what they really think. They're going to say to you, it's up to you, do whatever it is you want. They're just not going to be interested because they know you keep ignoring them. And at some point, my conscience was my friend and was telling me what it is I needed to do. And I stopped listening. And every time I ignored the voice of my conscience, the voice became softer and softer to the point where it didn't speak to me any longer. And so that's what's been going on. And when I'm no longer listening to my conscience, even though deep within my heart I know what the truth is, but when I don't follow my conscience, it is not possible for the mind to be calm and quiet. It is not a reality anymore. When I start listening to the voice of my conscience again, my mind is again going to come back to a state in which there is that calmness, in which there is that quiet, in which I can feel free. Think about the situation where your mind is in upheaval and the state of confusion that this creates and the state of bondage and pressure and tension that you feel. And we've heard enough stories about the impact of stress and tension and burnout in these last few years. You know all the statistics of all of those things. But the other side of the story, the impact that a mind that's calm and quiet that has on your consciousness, your feelings, your life, your relationships, where you see the contrast of that very, very beautifully and easily and clearly. And so the advice that I was given at that time, many years ago, was what you have to do is to clean out the conscience. And the way you start cleaning the conscience is by seeing what are the different factors that influence it. And as you begin to see all the different layers of influence and you start cleaning them out, then you begin to see what that original, pure, pristine state of conscience is, in which there's such power that the mind doesn't go crazy, but the power of the clear conscience is such that the mind moves in that track. It's able to stay in the right direction. Let's have a little experiment with this also now. Again, same procedure, sitting quietly, letting the mind be free from other things. I'll speak out my own thoughts again. I look inside, and as I look at my mind, just simply watching my mind allows it to slow down. Instead of racing in a dozen different directions, my thoughts now simply focus on the being of light that I am. And in this awareness of calm, I look deeper within myself. I look at my conscience. I go deep inside my own being and touch the truth of my own conscience. And in this awareness of truth, the conscience is powerful. The conscience is free. Free from influence. Free from the things of the past. Free from the things that people have said. As my mind becomes quiet, I can listen. I listen to the sound of my conscience. And just simply listening and valuing what the conscience has to say empowers it. and I'm able to throw away the layers of dust that had accumulated. As I begin to listen to my conscience, I have the courage and faith to put those thoughts into action. My mind becomes calm. I come back to the awareness of the moment here and now. But now, with a conscience that's clear, powerful, able to guide my mind in the right direction. In terms of the definitions of Raj Yoga, the mind is one aspect of the soul. It used to be very interesting for me when I'd see the headlines of exhibitions in London or magazines around that spoke about mind, body and spirit. And so body, okay, mind, spirit, now how does all that fit together? Where is the mind? Where is the spirit? And Raj Yoga gave us a very simple definition, that it's not actually three things in that way. It's actually just two things. There's the body, and we can find out all about that. And then there's the spirit. And within the spirit, and I would use the word interchangeable with soul, and in terms of the soul, all the things that I've mentioned so far are actually related to the soul itself. Mind, that's not physical, that's not part of my physical form. Conscience, that's definitely not part of my physical form. And so mind, conscience, these are definitely part of the soul itself, the invisible, the non-material, that which is beyond measurement, that which is beyond physical dimension. And another part of all of this that I want to bring in now, in terms of learning how to keep the mind calm and peaceful. And you can again see that there's a few interesting details that are connected with all this, because I'm told that in India, when they first started these experiments with stilling the mind, and I'm sure that quite possibly other parts of the Orient and the East also started around the same time, but certainly it's been well documented that in India it started around 2,500 years ago. Imagine. They started experimenting with the mind 2,500 years ago in India, and that is documented. Some would say even longer, but that's the figure that I believe makes sense. And what they did at that time was to try all sorts of physical exercises and postures in the hope that this would bring a stillness and calmness to the mind. And it did to a certain extent. And I won't ask you to raise your hands here now, but generally in the West, many people who've experimented with Hatha Yoga, the physical postures, at some point, sooner or later, come to appreciate the value of meditation and silence. And I've never been to a Hatha Yoga session myself, so I speak from theory. I've witnessed some, and I know many who've done it, and I've known great masters who've been really the masters of the art, but I've never actually done a Hatha Yoga session myself. But what I've heard and understood is that at the end of a Hatha Yoga session, they have what they call the Shavasana, the corpse posture, in which you just lie totally still and just let the body become completely quiet. And what many people report back after that is that not only is the body very calm and quiet, but the mind is also the same, very calm and quiet. And so the process of the exercises and the postures have actually brought them to that point where there is that state of stillness for a short space of time. But 45 minutes and the Hatha Yoga class is over, and you leave the space and you go off into the tube train or the bus or your car, and what happened? The piece got left behind in the yoga ashram, and you carried away all the other experiences of peacefulness with yourself after that. And the other thing, and I won't mention names, but a very famous master, one of the most famous masters of Hatha Yoga, and I had the good fortune of meeting him many times in very informal circumstances in different situations. And his school still runs in different places, many places, and the main one in my own hometown in Pune. And on the one side, I would see his, at the time I knew him, he was 60, and through the years as I got to know him better, by the time he was ready to leave, he was in his 80s. So I knew him for that space of quite a period. And he was perhaps one of the superb masters of the 20th century. And yet he was equally renowned, not just for his discipline and training in people in Hatha Yoga, but he was equally renowned for his anger. Both things were together. That was very interesting. And where people weren't following the postures that he was wanting them to, he had no hesitation in actually taking a stick and hitting them with a stick. And that made me think, what happened? What happened to a quiet mind? You can have mastery over the body, but it seems to be quite a separate subject to have mastery over the mind. True story. No addition, no exaggeration. And this is actually what they discovered some thousands of years ago, that you can come to that state of absolute mastery over the body, but to have mastery over the mind and have a mind that's calm and quiet is actually quite a separate subject. And you can try for years and experience a few moments of peace. But to have a mind that's calm whilst engaged in all the things you need to be doing, now that's another story. And again, Brahma made us aware through the teachings of Raj Yoga. And you've heard this term Raj Yoga now, I've used it several times, but there's actually two quite distinct aspects of Raj Yoga that I want to come back to in just a minute. But the teachings that Brahma Baba taught about Raj Yoga were that when you understand that soul and body are separate, spirit and body, whatever you want to call it, where is the mind? Is the mind in the body? And if the mind were in the body, then yes, learn gymnastics, learn postures, learn hatha yoga, and you'd get to the point where you could discipline the mind. But if the mind isn't in the body, and if the mind is part of the soul, then no matter how much you learn to discipline the body, not going to be able to discipline the mind. And if I think about what the mind is, again, in terms of the definitions of Raj Yoga, that which is able to create thought, that which is able to create feelings, that which is able to transcend time and distance. You go back to the past, you go into the future, you go to Bombay, you go to New York, all happens within a flash. So really, an energy that transcends time and distance and all physical limitations. And that's certainly not applicable to the body. And so where does it apply? Where does the mind reside? It's within the soul. And so it's not by the discipline of the body that I can make my mind calm and quiet. It's by understanding what's going on within the soul that I can learn to make my mind peaceful and calm. Does that make sense to you? It made a lot of sense to me. And at that point, when Baba said, well, what is it that's actually controlling the mind? It's not the body, sure. And when we say soul, well, soul covers many different aspects. And so which aspect of the soul is it that actually disciplines the mind? And there Baba gave an image which is a very ancient, traditional image used in India. Now I mentioned that there were two types of Raj Yoga. There's a Raj Yoga which has been around for a few thousand years, around 2,500 years again, the same time that Hatha Yoga started, different types of yoga started, including Raj Yoga at that time. And the most famous one is the Patanjali Raj Yoga, and some of you might be practitioners and familiar with it. But the Raj Yoga taught by Patanjali had whatever features it has, and the Raj Yoga taught by Brahma Baba in modern times, the modern interpretation of Raj Yoga, has a number of features that are quite distinct and different to the ancient ones. And what is ancient? Again, interesting question. Is there something more ancient than 2,500 years? Well, there is. There are things that are many more thousands of years older than just a few thousand. And so, in fact, the original teachings of Raj Yoga that people practiced way back, that gave them the ability to train the mind and elevate the mind and bring the mind to a consciousness to its highest state, that allowed evolution of humanity to take place. Now, that's the Raj Yoga that Brahma Baba was able to begin to understand and become an instrument to share and teach and practice himself. And so that's the Raj Yoga that I'm talking about tonight, not the one of Patanjali. And I'm sure some of you who are practitioners of that would have many questions about that. But within the teachings of Raj Yoga in their present form, the modern version, the interpretation today that applies here and now for us at this moment, a very ancient image, the image of a horse, many horses, not just one horse, many horses, and reins holding the horses, and a driver actually keeping the reins. in his hands. And the mind has always been compared to the horse, running, racing, needing a training. And if you don't give it a training, it's just going to run wild and it's going to be of no use to anyone, anything. But reins and someone actually holding the reins. Some of you may have seen a very beautiful image in Delphi in Greece, and it's called the charioteer. Anyone remember seeing it? I saw it many years ago, and it's still very clear in my mind. It's a figure, a statue of a young man, very regal. And of course the statue is not intact anymore. It's broken, the arms have been bust by whoever. But even within that, you see the regal stance of this young man, and the statue is called the charioteer. And he's wearing royal garb. He's not wearing the clothes of, one would imagine, a driver, a charioteer. And what you see is the steadiness of his eyes, the focus of his eyes, and you see him holding the reins. The arms have been damaged, but you still see that. And it's actually the image of what's happening in here. The soul, the charioteer of this chariot, and the soul holding the reins of the horses, the intellect holding the mind. And it's, as I say, it's a very ancient image, a very powerful and beautiful one that's still there today to see. But it brings back this idea of who is the charioteer and what does the mind do, and how am I supposed to bring back the mind to that state of calmness and quiet. And so at a time when I have no idea of the soul, forget about keeping the mind calm, it doesn't happen in today's world anymore. Or even when I start practicing this consciousness of the soul, but I don't understand the mechanism of how things work within the soul, still not so easy. When my intellect, I'll use another word for intellect because the English word intellect doesn't fully convey everything. Buddhi, when the buddhi, that aspect of my consciousness that's able to take in information and use that information and turn it into knowledge. And as I use that knowledge in my life and apply it in my life, it becomes wisdom in my life. Well, it's this vessel, the intellect, that's capable and able to do all of this. And so in that state where I now have the understanding I'm soul, I practice this awareness of being a soul. I maintain this consciousness of who I am. In that state, the intellect is so powerful that I keep track of where my mind is going. Not here, not there, not in 1,000 different directions, but where I want it to go. And so I'd like us to try another little exercise again, but this time bringing in another component, not just the component of the soul, because one awareness is to have this beautiful thought that, yes, I'm a soul and I'm a being of light. But at this point where I seem to have lost a little of the light and the light has become a little dim, then I need to connect with the powerhouse to be able to draw from that powerhouse of unlimited energy, so much power that the light again begins to shine. And so in our meditation now, what we're going to do is to connect with the source of light, the source of love, of power, of might, the Almighty. And if you believe in God and you understand God, the Supreme, as a being of light, and again this image gives you an idea of that, easy. But even if you don't believe in God, that's fine. Just use your imagination and just try it out as an imagination, as an exercise in which you're focusing on this point of light. And why I say this is because it does bring about amazing changes, even if you just use it as an imaginary exercise, really. Don't even believe that it's God or anything like that, but just a point of light which is the source of power and love and truth and energy. Just try it, okay? And if you believe in God, wonderful, even easier. I switch to the consciousness of I, the soul, allowing the consciousness of the body to recede into the distance. And in this awareness of who I am, I, the soul, take charge of what's going on within my own inner world. I, the soul, am the master. And in this awareness of my own mastery, my sovereignty, my dignity, I hold the reins absolutely strongly in my hands and guide my mind to the destination of my choice. I focus my thoughts on the Supreme, the being of light, the source of light, of love, of might, of mercy. And my mind is drawn to the beauty of the Supreme, the beauty of God's love, the radiance of God's light, the power of the Almighty. As my mind connects with the source from the ocean, light and love reach the soul. The might and mercy transform the soul. But they reach not only the soul, they reach out into the world, so that God's light and love and mercy and might can touch all people in every corner of this world. And touch nature. My mind focuses totally on the Supreme. And God's qualities reach out and serve the world. And in the process, my own mind is transformed, and my mind is filled with God's light and love and might and mercy. The more I focus on God, the more my mind becomes calm and quiet, and whatever was the negativity, the waste, the weakness, all of that is cleansed and washed away. And so meditation serves two very powerful purposes. That of the transformation of the self, to be able to reach the stage that I would like to have for myself, for my life. But it also serves a very beautiful altruistic purpose, and that is to be able to serve the world. Who, where, what, how, doesn't matter. Don't need to know, don't need to have that information or the acknowledgement or the honor or regard that comes as a result of all of that. Just simply need to be an instrument that's able to be a channel to serve. When one person does this, we see wonderful results. When 10 people do it together, the results multiply. When 100 and 1,000 people do it together, it's powerful enough to transform the world. I believe that very deeply. And I think that this is why so many of you are here tonight, because you're also seeing that other ways of working to try to change the world aren't happening. The more we try to change things on an external level, the more we see war and violence, whether from humans or nature. We see economies collapse, we see crazy things happen. And yet when we start focusing on the things we need to do inside, we begin to see the impact of how that works outside and the things that change outside. And I know that the 21st century, and in particular the start of this year, has been so dramatic that many, many people have the question, what is it that I can do? And this is what I can do. I can start having a calm and peaceful mind and become an instrument to share that. Thank you for your attention. Angelo, I don't know whether you were planning to come up to ask for questions, but my sense of it, and if you do have questions, I don't mind taking them up, but my sense of it is just to close with another meditation. What do you feel? Yes? Okay. So you want to do the announcements and then we do the final meditation?
Yes, I'd just like to mention that outside on the table you will find the new leaflets for the new lecture series. And also next week the self-esteem course will start. And 1 week after there is a meditation course will start. So if you would like to register, you can find all those details inside the leaflets. Thank you.
And there's a bookshop that's open.
Yes, and the ushers will guide you. So those of you who would like to go to the bookshop and buy a CD or the latest book of Sister Jayanti,
I didn't mean it as a promotion. We come together in the awareness of the Supreme, allowing God's light and love to touch our hearts and minds. And as God's love touches our hearts, we can forgive and let go. As God's love touches our minds, we change. We see things differently. There's a softness and gentleness that comes in. An awareness of kinship, a recognition of the one family that we are. As God's might touches the soul, I awaken. I understand what it is I need to do. As God's might touches the conscience, there's strength, there's power. I know I will follow the path of truth. On my own, it would be difficult. But with the support of the Almighty, it's natural, it's easy. As God's mercy touches the soul, I recognize the moments again and again when God's compassion has helped me, and my feelings change, and the harshness that had been acquired through the years begins to melt. This is what I have to do. Just as I have experienced God's compassion, I need to extend the same to others, so that with love and humility I can accept my family. I keep this connection with the Supreme. So that the gifts of the Supreme stay with me. I come back to the awareness of the things that need to happen here. But I keep this connection so that my mind is filled not just with calm and quiet, but also with light, with love, with joy and compassion. As I leave this room, I carry this experience to be able to share this through vibrations, through the eyes, through words, through actions. Om Shanti. Have a safe journey home, and we hope to see you back here again very soon. Good night.